So we're going to go through these notes together. We're going to use a special Google Chrome extension that's going to help us write math symbols and equations. So the first thing we need to do is download this to our Google Chrome. So I want to go to Google Chrome extensions, and I'm going to open up this store here, and we're going to type in Equatio, which is like equation without an N at the very end. This is what the picture will look like for the app. It's called Equatio Math Made Digital. I'm going to add this to Chrome, and I'm going to click Add Extension. Now I have already had this extension added previously, so when you go to open this, it might be required that you perform a couple, answer a couple questions. You might have to say that you're a student. You might have to give them your Pender County email address, but you shouldn't have any issues adding it to Chrome. So I like to have it up here in my pinned bar. So you click this little puzzle piece. I'm going to pin this to the extensions, and I'm going to actually take this because I like to have it at the beginning, and I'm just going to drag it over. That is purely a preference thing. So since I just downloaded a new extension, I'm just going to refresh my page to make sure I can open it. And then you can click anywhere in your document, and when you hit this button, it should, here it is, open this along the bottom. So what I'm going to do in this video is we are going to go over the intervals again, writing domain and range, writing increasing and decreasing, but I'm also going to show you how to do this in a document using this equation editor. This will work in Google Docs, it will work in Google Sheets, it'll work in Google Slides. You can use this in any of the Google Chrome apps. So starting with domain, and I'm actually going to move this out of the way so we have a little bit more room. So you'll notice this is different than our graph yesterday because I have arrows at the end of my graph. And I'm going to just give myself a little bit more room here. So since there are arrows at the ends of my graph, this tells me that this graph is going to stretch on forever and ever. So I could go all the way down here to, let's say, -100 for x. And I would still see a graph somewhere up here, very high up in the air because it's going on forever. So when I'm talking about input and output values for a graph that has arrows that go on forever and ever, I'm going to have to think about what mathematical value or symbol or statement we use to represent forever. That's infinity. So if I'm talking about the input values down here that align with this arrow that's going on forever and ever, that's going to be negative infinity, because I could say that my x values are going to happen forever and ever and ever, and no matter what negative x value I look at on my input value here along the x-axis, I could find a part of my graph that gives me an output value. So I'm going to open up Equation Editor, and I'm going to type in a negative sign, and then I'm going to start actually typing the word infinity. And you'll notice that it pops up right here for me with this symbol. So I can click on this, and Equation Editor will automatically put that infinity sign there for me. Now, if we think about our intervals that we wrote yesterday, there was an inequality symbol here, and then since these are x values, I'm going to use x. Now the question is, should this symbol here have an equal to, or should it not? The question we have to ask ourselves is, could I ever actually equal or reach infinity? And I can't. So I do not put an equal to if I see infinity. Now on the other side of this, I'm going to click this to just bring this equation editor back down for a moment. On the other end, I have another arrow. So that tells me I could go all the way up here to positive 500 for x and still find an output value for y, because this is going to keep going down forever. So all of these input values are valid. That tells me the other side of this is also infinity, but it's positive because my input values here are positive. So this is my inequality statement that I'm going to write. I'm going to click on my Google Doc to make sure that when I hit the Insert Math button, it goes into my domain cell. So I'm going to click this Insert Math button, and now it will have inserted my interval right in my table. Now we're going to do the same thing with range. We're going to go up and look at our graph. You can hit this delete button here, the trash button, and that will clear out your equation editor. So I'm going to minimize this again. So now my range goes from the bottommost value to the topmost value. So my bottommost value, I'm going to look at this part of my graph here. There is an arrow. That means it's going down forever. I will never reach the end of this graph because it's going to go on forever. So again, I'm doing negative infinity. This button here allows me to type. If you want to use your mouse pad or an actual mouse, you can click this handwriting tool, and you can come in here and actually start tracing out what you want to put in your equation. So I'm starting at negative infinity. Like we just talked about, I can never equal infinity. These are all y values. And you'll notice as I'm doing my handwriting over here, it's reading my handwriting and writing my interval for me on the right-hand side. So now I need to look at my topmost value for the right-hand side of my inequality. And here I see another arrow. That means it's going up forever. I will never reach it. So it's going to be positive infinity for the left-hand side. Now again, just to make sure I'm inserting into the right cell, I'm going to click on my Google Doc, click on range, and insert that picture there. I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to minimize equation editor. And let's talk about minimums and maximums. So if I'm going on forever and ever and ever, I will never be able to reach the top. That tells me I will have no absolute maximum. There will not be one. Same thing here. I have an arrow pointing down forever, so there are no absolute minimums because it's going down forever and ever and ever. If I scroll back up a little bit, you will notice though I have these turning points. These turning points are going to be important to me not only for some information about maximums and minimums, but also because these turning points are going to help us write our increasing and decreasing intervals. So this point right here would be a relative minimum. Its coordinate is -1, -2. Now you could do one of two things. You could type it in just using your keypad right into the Google cell, or you can come into your equation editor and type it in as a point and insert it that way. Now I have my settings so that my text is very large when I insert the information. There are some options here that you can work with. There are math options, so I changed mine to extra, extra large. I use this a lot when I am creating the activities and the practices that we do together in class. So you could also just type it in by hand. That's fine as well. So again, if you want to change your settings to make your font larger when you insert it, you click on this arrow here. You're going to go to options. You're going to click on math options and then the font. So if we do a relative maximum now, I'm going to look here to +1, +2. Oops, and it helps if you're actually clicked in the cell. So we're just going to finish the rest of this before we do increasing and decreasing. So y-intercept, that's the point where I cross the y-axis here. So that happens right at the origin. So that means my y-intercept is 0, 0. And looking at this graph, there are no portions where my graph is horizontal. So that means I have no constant intervals. So now going back to increasing and decreasing. When we did our last key feature video, I did a lot of drawing on my graph to figure out where I was increasing and where I was decreasing. If you're given a graph like this in a Google Doc or a practice activity that I've given you that's digital, what I can do is I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to copy this picture. I'm going to go to Insert, Drawing, and I'm going to insert a new drawing. And then I can right click and I can paste this graph right into my drawing. Maybe. Oh, I had already done that. So this is what it will look like when you copy and paste your graph into a drawing. If it has already created a drawing for you, you just double click on it and you can edit it. So what I want to do is I want to look at my turning points. So I'm going to insert, we can insert a little circle. This is a turning point here. And I'm going to do another circle right here. This is a turning point there. So, oops, that's not really on the... All right, so there are my two turning points. This is my relative minimum and my relative maximum. These two things are going to help me figure out the turning point X values for my increasing and decreasing intervals. So yesterday I drew lines, so I'm going to do the same thing now. I want to insert a line. Oops. Maybe it won't let me. Let's try this again. There we go. So I'm going to insert a line and I'm going to go straight up and down through that turning point. Now you have some options when you're in this drawing. We can change the color. If you'd like it to be a little bit brighter, you can change the color. If you'd like to change the thickness, you can do that. I'm going to make it a little bit thinner. You can also change, if you want a dotted line or a dashed line, you can do that as well. I don't need another line. So now I see this vertical dashed line here. If you need to make another line and you don't want to do the same process over again, you can click on that line you already created you can right click on it and hit copy. And then I'm going to right click elsewhere on the graph and hit paste. And then I can drag it over to that other turning point. So I'm going to save and close this. So now the information that I put on there is transferred over to my actual document. So now I'm going to work on my increasing interval. Well, the first section is decreasing, the next section is increasing, and the last section is decreasing. So this graph has one increasing section and two decreasing sections. So we're going to start with increasing. So I've clicked on my increasing cell so that I can insert my equation there, or my interval. I'm just going to type it again. So I'm starting at -1. It is a turning point, so that is a less than symbol only. It is not equal to. These are x values. And then I'm traveling along this increasing section to another turning point, which tells me my inequality is less than, again, not less than or equal to. Less than or equal to will only happen if it is a end point or a starting point. If it is a turning point, I will not include the equal to sign. And then I stop increasing at x equals 1. And I'm going to insert that inequality into my document. And there it is. Now we have to do decreasing. Now I have two decreasing intervals. I'm going to start with this one over here. So this interval begins decreasing at this turning point here. I'm going to clear this one out. This is 1 for an x value. And now I'm thinking about all these x values along here. I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. But because there's an arrow, these are going on forever. Just like in my domain, I had an infinity. I'm going to have an infinity again because these are going to continue on forever. So here I don't have a less than because it's a turning point. And for infinity, I don't have a less than, or excuse me, I don't have an equal to. I only have a less than because I can never equal infinity. So I'm going to insert that into my decreasing interval. So I'm going to click back into this cell, and I'm just going to hit enter so that I have my second decreasing interval going into that same cell. So I'm going to scroll back up so we can see our graph, and I'm going to get rid of this. So I have -1 as one of my x values, but this one starts way down here. And just like the decreasing interval on the other side, because I have an arrow here, I'm going to have another infinity. Since these x values are negative, this will be a negative infinity. It's only a less than because it's infinity. And the other side is only a less than because that -1 value was at a turning point. So I'm going to minimize this again. So you'll see now both of my decreasing intervals are in there. So this is a brief overview of how to deal with graphs that have arrows. It also showed you how to use equation editor. Make sure that this has been added to your Google Chrome, because your practice activity is again practicing with graphs that have arrows and practicing with writing your intervals using equation editor.